So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Rocco and Michelle. And this week's topic was selected, and I've got so much passion around because Rocco attended a Pressgani conference. And the topic, is it the conference or the speaker?
The conference itself.
Okay, so the conference itself was the power of the human experience. And so we're going to start with some quotes, and then we're going to start unpacking it. And yeah, it's a really important topic, and the power, and hopefully give some people ideas on what they can do and the responsibility that we have. So here's the first one: is be curious, be disruptive, tell stories, and set the data aside. So Rocco, I know you and I talked a little bit about level setting around this. Mm-hmm. And for me, when I was just sitting there going, yes, 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 for me, the part of this that's so powerful is that it's not about numbers, data, reports, anything else, and it's not about transactions, right? I think that's one of the comments you made. But this really is about connecting as people. Mm-hmm. And understanding that we have so much more power and control in creating different experiences that aren't just transactional things, and to have different outcomes.
That's right. So both of us have worked in healthcare for the last number of years, and we're both still in healthcare. And I think what was so powerful for me in this particular conference and on this particular subject was that healthcare can become very transactional. The aspects of clinical care, I need to pull your vitals, I need to give you this treatment and whatnot. And what stood out to me about the conference was realizing that healing happens when there's connection. It goes beyond, even during the pandemic, one of the concerns was that without family members present, healing might take longer, because they don't have that connection to help them, give them hope and inspire them to, keep going and things like that. So this idea of there's a person behind that condition or that diagnosis, and how can we connect with that person to help in the healing process was just very moving for me. Mm-hmm. And one of the guest speakers that kicked off the conference, his name is Bryan Stevenson, not in healthcare, an attorney, and helps inmates that have been convicted. But he basically talked about his life and how he came to be an attorney, but he basically threw out a challenge that there are basically 4 things needed to transform the human experience. And one of them was the power of proximity, this idea of getting close to seeing, experiencing that other human and connecting with that other human on that level, on that person level, not just the transactions. The second one was change the narrative. But in order to change the narrative, you have to first be aware of what the narrative is, your own biases, your own experiences that you've lived, and theirs. Mm-hmm. And if the idea is through human experience that we can be better than what we are today, then we potentially have to change the narrative that's out there if it's stopping us from being that better human. The third is hope. Bring hope to the situation, to the person, to the condition, which is what I just said in regards to the healing process. And then the last one was get uncomfortable. None of this is easy. It takes some reflection and takes some vulnerability on you as a person to open yourself up and have conversations, especially if you're talking about changing the narrative. So it just was very powerful. And I just thought as leaders, it's important for us to surface it and talk about these things, because that's where it begins, is we've got to start bringing it forward and discussing what this means.
Yeah. So obviously my brain's firing.
I'm going to smile.
50 zillion levels, and I'm like, ping, ping, ping. So I want to make a couple comments and connections, right? Back to other stuff. And I think this is part of it too. Other stuff I've learned and heard and other people say things, right? So when you talk about the person in front of us or the patient, right? They're a human, they're a person. Chris Waugh, when we were at Sutter Health, I remember going to, there was Leadership Academy alumni event and stuff. And so we went there, and what was, it was so basic and so eye-opening, right? Is he had the patient journey, and he said, but here's the thing, we label people as patients, right? But they start off a person, right? We cross paths with them. They're still a person. They leave our facility, whatever, and they're still a person. And I think that's the thing, is what happens, what you're talking about, especially in healthcare, in a very vulnerable state, because patients are typically not at their best and their strongest, right? They're at a very vulnerable state in life. And so it's like realizing that even though you're a patient, you still got the human and the person that's there along with it. Yeah. And I was sitting in the room going, brilliant and duh, you know, I mean, never thought of it that way, but it opens your eyes. The other
we get so caught up in just doing, right? That we forget to pause and have that connection.
Well, and acknowledge. And it's like, you know, you're talking about Bryan, you know, working with inmates. It's not, yes, that in the moment, that's who they are and what's going on. But if there are conditions that got them there, that there's an inequity or something's off between sentence that they received and the crime or whatever they committed, where do you go for help? Mm-hmm. Who's the lifeline that can come and help, right? And I think bringing that human aspect into it is so vitally important. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because that does take courage, because a lot of times you're going against the general consensus because people have labeled, right? Well, you're in this situation, so all these things must be true. And I think that's part of the narrative piece that you're talking about.
Yeah.
In my head came, it's the freaking elephant in the room too. Mm-hmm. It's like, and if we don't talk about it and highlight it, how could we possibly start changing it?
That's right. That's right.
Hope. I remember talking to leaders during COVID because there was so much that we didn't know. There was constantly changing, you know, and I remember coaching them, going, you have to be real with your teams, right? They need to know what's going on, what's happening, all that stuff. But here's our job. We have to give them hope.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
It's the resilience piece, right? It's what brings the motivation and inspiration to keep going. If we don't have hope, then people will give up. Or they'll just stay where they're at. Yeah. And that if we want to be better, you can't stay where you're at. Oh. You've got to be able to move forward. So that hope is what helps you move things forward and gives you the resilience to go back in there and try again and reconnect again. So
yeah, it comes to mind for me. It's the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I need to know that there can be something different. It is possible.
Yeah. It's the gone with the wind moment. The sun will come up tomorrow. You know, it's like, okay, now I've got that. Will be another day.
I've got that in my head.
I don't know why that came up, but I all of a sudden when you were talking, got the Scarlett O'Hara moment. Gone with the wind.
No, and I'm like, there's another song in my head now too. It's like, thank you for that, Rocco, because it's like it's a small world, you know, that you can never get out of your head.
Yeah.
As you're floating through all the little stuff. And the whole idea, get uncomfortable. It's like, I go back to John Maxwell, and what I learned from that whole stuff is that's where growth happens, beyond our comfort zone. And so if we're the power of the human experience is amazing, And if we're going to put ourselves in a position to actually affect change and create a different experience, because a lot of times we tell ourselves, what can I possibly do? I'm only one person. That's where the ripple starts.
Yeah.
And so we can't just sit by as bystanders. We actually have to understand what it is. And it can be in our sphere of influence, the span of control, because I'm going to tell you, there is freaking opportunity outside your front door, people. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be on this large, crazy scale. But
I think it starts with you. It starts with you, because we're human too, right? So it starts with you. And when you get to know yourself and understand what narratives you have, and understand how the experiences that you've had in the past have shaped those biases or those narratives, that, you know, then you have the power to make change and within yourself, and it'll have a ripple effect, because I mean, just like we've talked about through, I think, every single podcast we've ever had, how Margie has transformed our life, right? The experience that we had with Margie literally brought new awareness, new perspectives for us. It disrupted our way of thinking and changed it for the better. And so again, I think one of the lessons that she taught from the very beginning is it starts with us. And I think that applies here as well. The human experience starts with you.
Yeah, it's walking the talk, role modeling, whatever that may be. And I think it's something we don't have to wait to start doing things differently. We don't have to wait for the power of proximity, changing the narrative, to create hope, to get uncomfortable. We don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for anyone to do that. And I think that's part of it too. Is, I mean, this is like, what was that freaking movie with Cuba Gooding Jr.? He was a diver back in the day for the military. It wasn't A Few Good Men. It was another one. Anyway, if you know the name of that movie, you're probably saying it to yourself right now. Okay. But the feeling that I had, Rocco, when you were sharing the 4 things to impact change, right? The human experience. I felt like I felt when I was watching that movie. It's like, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
I am not doing enough.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is this call to action.
Yeah. It's uplifting.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, so anyway, so here's what I want to do. I want to make sure that future episodes, I would love to take each one of these 4 things and unpack it some more, because this is like the biggest gold nugget you could ever find. And Bryan Stevenson, I thank you for that. And I thank Rocco for bringing it to us that way. So anyway, I've enjoyed this. I know this could easily turn into a mini War and Peace novel, which we're not going to do right now. But I want us to commit to doing more of these. So what's 1 or 2 things you want people to walk away with, Rocco?
Be curious, be disruptive.
Yeah.
Start with yourself.
Thank you. I think the thing for me around the power of the human experience and these 4 topics that Bryan Stevenson called out is start with the hope that and it is possible, right, to change stuff. I think that's the thing for me right now is, if you're sitting back going, there's nothing I can do, change that narrative. Change that narrative to what can I do? And it doesn't mean that it's this, big bang, whatever, but it's those incremental things, to Margie's point, what's a little bit better look like, and start stepping into those things. But ask yourself what the possibility is and then go do it. So anyway, thank you very much. This has been Leadership Soundbites with Rocco and Michelle, and the power of the human experience, which was so freaking cool. And until next time, please like, share, subscribe, and I look forward to more.
Bye.